When a daring group of bikers, fueled by adrenaline and eager to defy every obstacle, dared to threaten John Cena, no one could have imagined that behind his calm demeanor and enigmatic smile lay an unstoppable warrior, a master with a powerful black belt in karate, ready to turn the threat into a display of justice and skill. The envelope trembled in John Cena's hand as he stood on the porch of his childhood home. 20 years had passed since he'd last set foot on these weathered wooden boards, but the screech of the swing's rusty chain in the evening breeze was achingly familiar. Inside the house, separated by mere inches of peeling door paint, waited the father he'd spent half a lifetime running from. His finger traced the edge of the sealed DNA test results. He didn't need to open it. The truth had been carved into his bones since he was 12. But his father, if he could still call him that, deserved to face what he'd buried beneath decades of calculated silence. John closed his eyes, remembering the phone call 3 days ago. His aunt's voice, brittle with age and urgency. "He's dying, John. Pancreatic cancer. 6 weeks, maybe less." The news should have brought relief, perhaps even satisfaction, but instead unleashed a tide of memories he'd fought to keep submerged. A sudden movement behind the curtained window jerked him back to the present. He was watching. Of course he was. Jade had always controlled what happened in his domain, orchestrating every entrance and exit with meticulous precision. John straightened his shoulders and raised his hand to knock, but the door swung open before his knuckles made contact. The man who stood in the threshold was a ghost of the towering figure who had dominated his childhood. Cancer had hollowed him, carved deep shadows beneath his once piercing blue eyes. But those eyes, they still held the steely calculation he remembered. John. His voice was a rasp, but the authority remained. Jade. He refused to call him Dad, not anymore, not after what he knew. He held up the envelope. "I've brought the truth with me, something you've been running from for a very long time." Jade's gaze didn't waver, but his hand tightened on the doorframe, knuckles whitening. For a heartbeat, neither moved. From the shadows behind Jade appeared a young woman, maybe 25, with familiar eyes, Jade's eyes. "Dad? Who is this?" the young woman asked, looking between them with growing confusion. John felt the ground shift beneath his feet. Dad. The word echoed in his mind like a gunshot. Jade had another child, a daughter who didn't know he existed. Her daughter who called him Dad without hesitation. Harold turned slightly toward the young woman. "Emma, this is an old family friend. Could you give us a moment?" His voice was gentle in a way Maya had never heard directed at her. Emma hesitated, studying Maya with open curiosity before nodding. "Sure, I'll be in the kitchen finishing dinner." She touched Harold's shoulder lightly, an affectionate gesture that sent a spike of pain through Maya's chest, before disappearing inside. Harold stepped onto the porch, pulling the door mostly closed behind him. The setting sun cast harsh shadows across his gaunt face. "You have a daughter," Maya said, the words flat and cold. "Yes." No apology, no explanation. "Does she know about me?" Maya already knew the answer. "No." Harold's gaze dropped to the envelope in her hand. "What exactly do you think you're going to accomplish here, Maya?" Maya's laugh was bitter. "Accomplish? I'm not here to accomplish anything. I'm here because I deserve answers, and you're running out of time to give them." She tapped the envelope against her palm. "I know William Reeves is my biological father. I know you discovered my mother's affair when I was 12. And I know you punished me for it every day afterward, while pretending to the world you were the perfect father." Harold's expression hardened. "You always were too smart for your own good." "Not smart enough." "I was 30 before I finally pieced it all together." Maya swallowed against the tightness in her throat. "Does Emma know what kind of man you really are? Does she know about the silent treatments that lasted weeks? The accidental exclusions from family events, the college fund that mysteriously disappeared?" Something flashed in Harold's eyes. Was it guilt, regret, or merely annoyance at having his past disturb his carefully constructed present? "I've changed," he said finally. "No," Maya countered, her voice steadier than she felt. "You just started over with a clean slate. New wife, new daughter, new chance to play the role of devoted father. But you're still the same man who looked at his 12-year-old daughter and decided she wasn't worth loving anymore. Harold's shoulders sagged, the first genuine reaction she'd seen. For a moment, he looked truly old, truly sick. Why are you here, Maya? To watch me die? To make sure? I suffer? The question hung between them, crowding the air with 2 decades of unspoken pain. Maya had been 12 when the whispers started. She'd catch fragments of heated arguments between her parents late at night, words like test and impossible and betrayal filtering through her bedroom wall. The atmosphere in their suburban Denver home changed so gradually she couldn't pinpoint exactly when her father's gaze began sliding past her as if she were invisible. Before, that summer, Harold Green had been the center of Maya's world. He taught her to ride a bike, coached her softball team, and spent Sunday mornings making elaborate pancake creations while her mother slept in. His approval had been everything, the sun her world revolved around. Then came the silence. Harold stopped speaking directly to Maya. He'd address the air above her head. "Tell your daughter dinner's ready," he'd say to her mother, Caroline. Or he'd leave notes with instructions instead of having conversations. At first, Maya thought it was a phase, something she could fix by being perfect. She brought home straight A's, cleaned the house without being asked, wrote apology notes for imagined offenses. Nothing worked. The wall between them only grew higher. Caroline tried to compensate, smothering Maya with a desperate kind of attention, but her eyes held a guilt that Maya couldn't understand. By the time Maya turned 15, Caroline was self-medicating with E-Key, vodka hidden in water bottles, slipping further away just when Maya needed her most. The summer before Maya's senior year, Caroline's car veered off a mountain road on her way home from a book club meeting. The alcohol in her system ensured she never felt the impact. At the funeral, Harold stood beside Maya, a respectable foot of empty space between them, accepting condolences with dignified nods. Not once did he look at his daughter or acknowledge her grief. 2 months later, Harold introduced Maya to Diane, a widow with kind eyes and nervous hands. 6 months after that, they were married, and Harold informed Maya that Diane would be renovating her bedroom once Maya left for college. "Your mother left you enough for a year's tuition," he said, the rare direct address catching Maya off guard. "I suggest you apply for scholarships for the remainder." Maya learned later that her college fund, the one Harold and Caroline had been building since her birth, had been emptied shortly after her 15th birthday. The money Caroline had left her was a separate account, one Harold couldn't touch. The weekend after high school graduation, Maya packed everything she could fit into her Honda Civic and drove east, putting the Rocky Mountains at her back. She enrolled at NYU, worked 2 jobs, and built a life measured by the distance from Denver. It was in New York that she met William Reeves at a faculty mixer. Maya was 26 then, just starting her career as an art therapist at a children's hospital. William was in his early 50s, a visiting professor of anthropology with laugh lines around his eyes and a gentle manner that immediately put her at ease. They connected over a shared love of obscure documentaries and spicy Thai food. After their 3rd dinner together, William mentioned he'd grown up in Denver, and Maya felt the first twinge of unease. By their 5th date, she'd learned enough to piece together a timeline that made her hands shake. William had worked with her mother at the Denver Art Museum for 2 years when Maya was a toddler. The resemblance, once she allowed herself to see it, was undeniable. They had the same deep-set eyes, the same left-handed gesture when emphasizing a point, even the same unusual allergic reaction to penicillin. When she finally asked William if he'd ever been more than colleagues with Caroline Green, the color drained from his face. "You're Caroline's daughter," he whispered, recognition and shock mingling in his expression. The DNA test was almost a formality, but Maya needed the official confirmation, the irrefutable evidence to present to the man who had punished a child for the decisions of adults. Now, standing on Harold's porch with the proof in her hand, Maya realized She hadn't fully considered what would happen after this moment. The confrontation she'd rehearsed for years was being rewritten by the presence of Emma, the half-sister who had grown up without knowing she existed. "I didn't come to watch you die," Maya said finally. "I came because I needed to understand how you could love one daughter and discard another." Harold's gaze shifted toward the house, toward Emma. It wasn't about love, it was about betrayal. "I was a child," Maya's voice cracked. "I didn't betray you. Every time I looked at you, I saw him. I saw your mother's lie. So you punished me for existing." Harold didn't deny it. The silence stretched between them, heavy with acknowledgement. The door creaked open, and Emma appeared, again. "Dinner's getting cold and you shouldn't be out in the evening air, Dad." Her eyes moved to Maya, curious but not unwelcoming. "You're welcome to join us. There's plenty." Maya saw Harold tense, preparing to intervene, to maintain the separation between his two lives. But before he could speak, a coughing fit doubled him over. Emma rushed to his side, supporting him with practiced movements that spoke of many such episodes. "I've got you," Emma murmured, helping him straighten. To Maya she added, "He needs to rest after eating, but please come in. Any friend of Dad's is welcome." Friend of Dad's. The irony wasn't lost on Maya. She looked at Harold, whose expression was unreadable through the pain. "Thank you," Maya said to Emma, making her decision. "I'd like that." Inside, the house had been transformed. Gone were the formal, untouchable spaces of Maya's childhood, replaced by comfortable furniture that invited you to sit, to stay. Photos lined the walls. Emma's progression from infant to young woman. Harold and a woman Maya assumed was Emma's mother in various vacation spots. Emma's graduation. A family history carefully curated to exclude any hint of Harold's previous. "Soitais." In the kitchen, Emma gestured for Maya to sit while she helped Harold into his chair. A pot of stew bubbled on the stove, filling the air with a savory aroma that made Maya's stomach clench with unexpected hunger. "So how do you know my dad?" Emma asked, ladling stew into bowls. Maya caught Harold's gaze across the table. The warning there was clear, but beneath it lurked something else. Fear, perhaps even a plea. "We're connected through family," Maya said carefully. "It's been many years since we've seen each other." Emma nodded, seemingly satisfied with the vague answer. "Dad doesn't talk much about the past. I know he was married before he met my mum, but that's about it." Maya's hand tightened around her water glass. Some pasts are difficult to revisit. Harold's expression flickered with what might have been gratitude. Throughout dinner, Maya watched the easy interaction between Emma and her father. Harold was different with her, relaxed, attentive, even occasionally humorous. This was the father Maya had glimpsed in her earliest memories, before the silence descended. When Harold excused himself to rest, Emma cleared the dishes, waving off Maya's offer to help. "He doesn't have much time left," Emma said quietly once Harold was out of earshot. "The doctors gave him 2 months, but I think it'll be sooner." "I'm sorry," Maya said, surprised to find she meant it. Emma studied her with sudden intensity. "You're not just a family friend, are you? There's something familiar about you. Your eyes, or maybe the way you tilt your head when you're listening." Maya hesitated. "It's complicated." "Life usually is," Emma smiled sadly. "Dad has a lot of regrets, you know. He doesn't talk about them directly, but sometimes when the pain medication kicks in, he mentions things. A mistake he can't fix. Someone he failed." The envelope with the DNA results felt heavy in Maya's pocket. She'd come here armed with truth, ready to shatter Harold's carefully constructed world in his final days. Looking at Emma now, this sister who had grown up without knowing her existence, Maya questioned her purpose. "Would knowing his regrets change anything for you?" Maya asked carefully. Emma considered the question. "I don't know. I love my father, but I'm not blind to his flaws. He can be rigid, unforgiving. My mother left when I was 14 because she couldn't live with his emotional walls." She gave a small, humorless laugh. "The irony is, her leaving brought us closer. He softened somehow." "At what cost?" Maya wanted to ask. "How many lives were damaged so Harold Green could learn to be a better father the second time around?" Before she could respond, A crash came from Harold's bedroom, followed by a weak call for help. Emma rushed to him, Maya close behind. Harold lay on the floor beside his bed, papers scattered around him. He'd been trying to reach a metal box in his closet and had lost his balance. As Emma helped him back to bed, Maya began gathering the fallen papers. Among them was a worn envelope addressed in her mother's handwriting. Her breath caught in her throat. She glanced up to find Harold watching her, his expression a complex mixture of resignation and something that might have been regret. "Emma," Harold said, his voice strained, "could you get my pain medication from the kitchen?" Once Emma left, Harold gestured weakly to the envelope in Maya's hand. "You should read it." Maya opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a letter dated just weeks before her mother's death. "Harold, by the time you read this, I'll likely be gone. The doctors say the cancer has spread too far, but I've chosen not to tell you or Maya yet. There's time enough for grief later. First, I must unburden myself of the truth I've carried for too long. Maya is not William's daughter. The affair ended before conception. The DNA test you found was from an earlier pregnancy I lost, William's child. I let you believe your suspicions about Maya because your coldness toward me had become unbearable, and part of me wanted to punish you. I never imagined you would transfer that punishment to our daughter. By the time I realized what was happening, your mind was set, and my shame kept me silent. Maya is yours, Harold, in blood and in spirit. The test results you found were misinterpreted in your anger. I've written a separate letter for Maya, explaining everything, which I've left with my sister. Whether you share this truth with her is your choice, but I beg you to end the cruelty. She deserves a father. Despite everything, I did love you. Caroline. Maya read the letter twice, her world tilting on its axis. All these years, all the certainty she'd built her identity around, shattered by her mother's handwritten confession. "You never had her tested," Maya whispered, looking up at Harold. "You just assumed—" Harold's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "I convinced myself the resemblance to William was obvious. When you left after graduation, it confirmed what I already believed, that you knew the truth too. But my letter, she says she left one explaining everything. Your aunt never gave it to you?" Maya thought of the strained relationship with her aunt after her mother's death, how the woman had seemed to be hiding something behind her awkward attempts at connection. "No. She tried to stay in touch, but I was too angry at everyone connected to my old life." The room fell silent, except for Harold's labored breathing. Outside, the sun had fully set, leaving them in the dim glow of a bedside lamp. "The DNA test I brought," Maya said finally. "It's not what you think. I compared my DNA with William's last year. We're not related." She pulled the envelope from her pocket, setting it on the bed unopened. "I came here believing I was confronting you with proof of your cruelty. Instead, we're both confronting how much we lost to assumption and pride," Harold finished, his voice barely audible. Emma returned with the medication and a glass of water, her gaze moving between them, sensing the shifted atmosphere. "Everything. Okay." Maya looked at her, truly her half-sister, sharing the same father. "Not yet," she answered honestly, "but maybe someday." After Harold took his medication and settled back against his pillows, Emma touched Maya's arm gently. "He needs to rest, but please don't leave yet. I feel like we've only just started talking." Maya nodded, following Emma back to the kitchen, her mind still reeling from the revelation. "He kept a box of your mother's things," Emma said suddenly as they sat at the kitchen table. "I found it once when I was looking for old photos. There were pictures of a little girl I didn't recognize. When I asked, he said she was someone he lost a long time ago." She met Maya's gaze directly. "That was you, wasn't it?" Maya couldn't speak past the tightness in her throat. She nodded. "You're my sister," Emma said, not a question, but a statement of recognition. "I always wanted a sister." The simplicity of her acceptance broke something in Maya. Tears she'd held back for decades finally spilled over, Half-sister, she managed. Emma reached across the table and took her hand. Just sister is fine with me. 3 weeks later, Harold Green passed away in his sleep. Emma on one side of his hospital bed, Maya on the other. In those final days, no grand reconciliation erased 20 years of absence, but small moments built fragile bridges. Harold asking to see photos of Maya's life in New York. Maya listening to his raspy recollections of her childhood soccer games, both acknowledging, without explicitly stating, that they could never recover what was lost. At the small funeral service, Maya stood beside Emma, accepting condolences from people who didn't know who she was. She didn't correct their assumptions that she was just a family friend. Some truths were hers to hold now, to examine in private. After the other mourners left, the sisters remained at the gravesite. The autumn air carried the scent of fallen leaves and imminent snow. "What happens now?" Emma asked, her voice small. Maya had asked herself the same question repeatedly over the past weeks. The answer remained elusive, but certain things had become clear. "Now we have choices," she said, watching the cemetery workers waiting discreetly to complete their task. "We can walk away from here and return to our separate lives, or we can see what it means to be sisters who met too late, but perhaps not too late." Emma considered this. "I'd like to know you," she said finally. "Not because of him, but because of us." Maya felt something unfurling in her chest. Not forgiveness, exactly, but possibility. The weight of silence Harold had imposed for so long was lifting, allowing space for new connections, new understandings. "I'd like that too," she said, and meant it. As they walked away from the grave, Maya thought of her mother's undelivered letter, now lost to time. Some truths would remain buried, some questions unanswered, but ahead lay the chance to build something neither Harold's cruelty nor his regret could taint, a relationship of their own choosing. The past could not be undone, but the silence that had defined it was finally broken.